Hey guys, how's it going? Muthurajah here, back with a new video lesson for y'all. In today's lesson, I want to discuss 3 simple reasons why you probably should not be practicing with a metronome right now, okay, or just yet. So I'm not here to completely dispel metronomes and say they won't work or help you. They have their benefits, but I guess what happens a lot of times is that people are very misguided with how they use the metronome. It's like, hey, here's a new piece of song, piece of information from a song. These 2 bars, I want you to learn the 12 keys. And the first thing we do is, oh, cool. And it starts to kind of work against you. And it brings me to my first issue with why you should not practice with the metronome. The metronome starts to prioritize time first, okay? Now, I've had this argument with many bass players. And some drummers too. They'd be like, hey, on the drums, when you practice your drums or rudiments and sticking and grooves and stuff like that, you sit down with the metronome because that's the way you do it. For a drummer, that makes a lot of sense because primarily that's what they do. They play time, they play the pocket, they keep the groove. They don't have to think about harmony and melody, at least not so directly like the piano player has to, or the guitar player or bass player has to. So for us, on the bass end of things, we need to learn the neck, we need to know our notes, and that can be hindered with the use of a metronome if you don't give yourself the time and space to actually learn. And I'm going to demonstrate this very simply right now. So I'm in the process of, I don't know how well you can see that. This is the suite number 6 from Bach. I have tasked myself with learning the entire suite, so I'm on page 1. I'm reading a few bars a day. Okay, so here's bar 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 bars of it. Okay, screwed up. Okay, I've got those 6 bars down ish. Now Let me put a metronome to that. Okay, so I screwed up on bar 4. Okay, so you might have noticed I repeated a certain part at least 2 or 3 times. It just slipped out of my hands, and the main reason it slipped out of my hands is because I'm trying to play it very directly in time. Okay, so would I use the metronome on this piece? First of all, I wouldn't. I just wouldn't take the metronome and practice it with specifically Bach, like all the stuff that I've learned in the past. Especially because this style of music is much more on the expressive end. So you really have to learn to pull and push the phrases, which cannot be done with a metronome unless you have it automated, which again can be very boring, you know. So what I wanted to demonstrate here right now was just exactly that. How, when I'm not familiar with a piece of information or music or a particular bar, and I sit down with the metronome starts to say, hey, play in time. Whereas my fingers start to go kind of haywire because they're aware that I have a G major triad and I end up hitting a C sharp. They're like, hey, that's not right. But I'm unable to fix it in the moment, and I'm forced to continue to play or forced to fix it then and there in time. Now, some of you might say, hey, isn't that good? It can be, but a lot of us don't have the patience to actually endure that every day. It's much better to take your time through a piece of music, no matter what it is. That's the bass line from Orient Express, Joe Zawinul, now with the metronome. Okay? This brings me to my second point, playing that bass line. The true ability to subdivide comes from within you and not the metronome. What the metronome does is it gives you reference to tighten your subdivisions, okay? But you should be able to know the difference between sixteenths and triplets, quintuplets, septuplets. The metronome alone is not going to tell you exactly what is a 6, what is a 5. It can give you a reference, okay? So one thing I like about this particular metronome, this is Pro Metronome on my iPhone, is that I can put a different subdivision based on the quarter note, which can be quite fun. So here is sixteenths. It's very annoying. So now if I remove that, man, that was bad. If I actually get rid of that, I can play the bass line a lot better. Still not the cleanest, because it's not an easy bass line to play. But how was I able to play it fairly tighter without the subdivisions guiding me? Because I have the subdivide. I need to feel all those little subdivisions. So whether you're using a conical system, Takadimit, Takajuna, or you're doing 1E and a 2E, and whatever you do, you need to learn to subdivide. So when you look at a piece of music on sheet, or you're writing something out and you're learning things, you just do it nice and easy without having to pressurize yourself by using a metronome, because the metronome just comes and knocks everything out. It kind of makes you feel so invalid for the way you practice, because you start to realize, oh shit, I don't play in time, so what's the point? How do I build my groove? How do I build my swing? When actually you should focus on, like I said, firstly, the note choices, and secondly, the subdivisions by yourself. So once I understand what's going on here, okay, that part is tripping me up. So even before playing it fairly in time, I'm just going. Okay, that part. And that left hand pull off. Now, still not tight. Okay, when I played that fill, it was possibly the tightest moment in the whole thing, because I realized my weakness when it comes to time or just general tidiness in my playing is playing a written line repeatedly, because it's hard. You need to be very strong with your technique, you need to be very consistent with your tone and projection. So these are things you need to practice away from a metronome. You do not jump on with the metronome. And that brings me to the last point. Okay, timekeeping. So timekeeping is very crucial, but what I'd much rather have anyone do is listen to a few styles of music. Okay, sit down with a metronome, preferably a metronome that has a tap tempo feature, and I want you to see how many of those tracks, okay, excluding electronic elements aside, how many of those tracks are metronomically aligned. I can tell you, one of my favorite bands of all time, Sugar, their older records, they wouldn't play with a click. But the newer records, they use a click, and they use a click live. But you know what? There's a very specific reason and purpose behind why they do that. It's to maintain the consistency from one show to the next, from one tour to the next. A metronome can ensure consistency, okay? If you're somebody who's looking to be a good studio musician, you need to be able to play with the click, okay? But I will also say this. If you're somebody who wants to be a studio musician, you should be able to read. You should be able to know harmony. You should be able to just groove and play and just come up with ideas on the fly, which means you need to be at a certain level, okay? I'm not trying to discredit anybody's work here. What I'm saying is be real. If you're one of those cats who just started playing bass and you're like, okay, I'm going to practice my scales. Cool, I learned C major in the first position, and here I go with my 16ths. Forget it. Just get it together first. And then with the metronome, okay. Now, I have posted lessons in the past talking about using the metronome differently on beats 2 and 4, maybe 1 and 3, maybe as a modulated groove, and there are so many things involved that I used and practiced a lot on the drums that I translated to the bass. But it's all at a very advanced level, okay? It's at a place where you can go at it because you're confident and grounded in your basics. So get the fundamentals down together, Okay, and at some point, the material that you're working on will tell you, hey, maybe you can give me some context in metronomic time. Sometimes I put on Logic and I would record and watch the grid just to see the consistencies of my 16th notes, because I want to be able to play as loose. That's not very rigid 16ths. This is what rigid 16ths. Very rigid 16ths versus so on and so forth. So you will be able to sit with the metronome and practice, but do not make that your utmost priority. Okay, so I hope you get something out of this, and as always, I'll see you guys in the shed. Until the next one. Oh wait, that's the wrong way. Peace.